Today, as you can see, we are going to be discussing the Stockholm Syndrome. I have to say, before the 2008/2007 presidential election of Barack Obama, I wasn't really super familiar with Stockholm Syndrome. I'd heard it, but I hadn't really seen it in action consciously. Obviously, I'd seen it in action my entire life. And so we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about what it is and the fact that there, I believe, are infinite forms of it, which is super sad. Now, the traditional definition of Stockholm Syndrome is a prisoner falling in love with their captor. You're in jail. You obviously don't want to be in jail. You don't want to think about being in jail. And so your brain does the only thing it can do, and that is to cleanse it, to say, okay, this is my world. The only people I have around me are my captors, and whether or not they abuse me or not, I need to make this a happy place as best I possibly can to survive. And here we go. Stockholm Syndrome. So why would I bring such a thing up on this show? Are we in prison? Are we going to be in prison? Am I trying to prepare you for that? No. Stockholm Syndrome also happens in any metaphorical way that matches the original scenario of its definition, which is people who get caught up in false paradigms typically go into some form of Stockholm Syndrome. And it goes further than the basic definition by a mile. Give you some examples. Most of you have at least a friend, a parent, a grandparent that believes that the Democrats are different than the Republicans, that the Republicans are different than the Democrats. They vote accordingly, they speak accordingly, they love and hate accordingly. And these individuals are stuck in a false paradigm, meaning the left and the right are exactly the same. They enable each other. They never really filibuster anything out of each other's hands. If they do anything that seems like they're disagreeing, it's complete Hollywood to make you believe that it exists. Just like fake wrestling has two fake factions and two fake sides and fake alliances, fake hatred, fake love. That's what the Hill is made from. Everyone working together, laughing their ass off as they get fantastic health care, better than yours. They get paychecks for the rest of their lives. If they just serve one term of anything, they could serve 2 years and get a free paycheck, six-figure paycheck, deep six-figure paycheck, plus tons of amenities for free for the rest of their life, so they don't have to really spend that check. But at home, we want to believe that America is made out of choices. And so our older generation, our baby boomer generation especially, was raised with the notion that these two groups were different. And without the internet, we really can't blame them for staying in the coma and the Stockholm Syndrome of these two. But here's what's happening. Once they dedicate themselves to one party, regardless if their party is good or bad, they still stay loyal and defend it. And everybody believes in loyalty, right? We're loyal to our family members. We're loyal to our friends, people who really deserve it. People who don't lie to us on average. You know, it happens, but our friends and family lie to us usually to the extent that we are simply human, flawed beings. The politicians of the world are habitual liars. People lie all the time and struggle to tell the truth. When asked a question, the mechanics in a politician's mind is not to gravitate to a true answer. It's to gravitate to a look for their captors. They look around for their captors to see who's going to be listening to the answer. If they're being interviewed with recording devices, they absolutely know their captors are watching them, and they answer accordingly to please the captor. which in their case is a banking cartel. Now, there's a presidential election brewing in the United States of America. This is 2016, May. And we have a felon running for president. A woman who is involved with more mishaps, deaths, cover-ups than any person, I think, that has been inside the White House previously or has been in any political role previously for quite some time. And she represents the Democratic Party. And there are people that have supported that woman in various capacities. And now that she is above ground, a felon, having concealed 30,000 plus emails from the United States government, when those emails reveal that she has whored herself out as a treasonistic backdoor into our country for money, there are people who are feminists who are in a Stockholm Syndrome loop with her because they wanted to support a good female. And now she's at the forefront with a record just bathed in blood. She has been noted by many of her husband's victims to be the bully that chased them out of the country. Vince Foster, who was investigating the Whitewater, who ended up dead, rolled up in a carpet in a park, labeled a suicide. Yeah, let's see you pull that one off. The first arms trade to ISIS, which is better known as Benghazi, where people died, she simply said, "What difference does it make?" In another meeting, she says, "It's not my problem anymore, it's the family's problems." Absolutely zero accountability for getting people killed. This is a woman running for the President of the United States. A woman who says she gets off of a plane under gunfire, sniper fire, when the footage looks like an average parade in a small country town. Absolutely no distress at all. So Hillary Clinton holds down a gigantic portion of Stockholm Syndrome people. Feminists who just want a woman to be president simply because they have a vagina. We don't worry about whether or not we found the best woman in the United States of America, born and raised. They just want a woman. And then you have your Democratic loyalists. Doesn't matter who runs. Satan could literally spawn out of a fire on television and say he's running for president. And as long as he is a Democrat, you have Stockholm Syndrome people. People who are being held captive by their inability to think for themselves. Their senseless loyalty to a party which does not represent any different side of the coin than both sides of the coin. And they're just going to mindlessly elect whoever stands on top of that Democratic platform. They have been held captive, these people have been held captive by deceit and a cowardice, an unwillingness to wake up out of the coma. And we're all going to suffer each and every single time that those that are held captive by their own consciousness and cowardice continue to push horrible choices forward. Now, what's interesting about this presidential election is the same exact thing goes true on the right. Except the right has had a complete replacement of all their normal candidates. And once that happened, all those normal candidates just dropped out. I think this morning the last dude dropped out. Kasich. So it's Donald Trump and only Donald Trump. Donald Trump is so absolutely different than everyone else, we're not quite sure what to make of the guy. We haven't had a real individual candidate, truly elected through popular vote, enter the presidency for, I would say, nearly 60 years. With JFK. I don't really know. No one really knows the last president that was actually elected, with a popular vote and not manipulated by a banking cartel out of Europe. So even though we know that the Republican Party is no different than the Democratic Party, when a candidate comes in like Trump, there's a potential that he is not going to cower down to those that are going to attempt to tell him how it is on his first day, on his first 3 days of briefing by the Secret Service, which is essentially the controlling body of the cartel bankers. Now, I want to make a distinction before we go further. I'll mention this a couple times probably in episodes, which is the Secret Service is built out of big oafy 6'8" kids who could shoot you from 50 yards running a zigzag. Those aren't the guys that control the President of the United States. Those are young kids used as human shields to protect whoever's in that position. When you see a squirmy-looking, frail white guy who's wearing a Secret Service suit, that's the dude that is telling the president his morning agenda, whether or not he's ever going to show up on television. The beautiful thing is unlike Barack Obama, who was absolutely nothing before he was president, who's concealed every single record of himself, his family, his history, to conceal the fact that he wasn't born in this country. Unlike that guy, who will sell out everyone so that he can actually say that he became someone before he died, Donald Trump already is someone. He already is someone. So he is not going to sit in a room and cower down. But they will most likely threaten him if he doesn't cower down. So we'll see how that goes. A bunch of us are aware of what's going on. A bunch of us are aware of the Stockholm Syndrome, which rules the day. And so if anything happens to that man prior to his election or after his election, we'll know what the tension was, what the problem was internally. And we'll know who to go to when we need to hold someone accountable. Let's continue. We have a gigantic destabilization wave going through the world right now. And it's been going on for quite some time. And Stockholm Syndrome is the single glue that holds insanity together. Now, I'm not going to go for the most intense things first, but I'm going to go into a pretty resisted topic. We all know that there is a single labeled authority in the world when it comes to space travel, space programs, space technology. It's the American company we call NASA. NASA is largely backed by a California, Caltech-based company called Jet Propulsion Laboratories. Outside of that, we usually work with foreign space agencies in different countries. France and Japan, France. And so our kids grow up looking at these organizations because they want to have the right answers. The parents want to have the right answers. And the Stockholm Syndrome can come on in a social method in a very unique way, and I wanted to use NASA as an example of this. If you were to go through the traditional definition of Stockholm Syndrome and you were captured by a faction or an individual, it's an instantaneous thing. You're held captive. You can't leave the four corners of their holding cell, right? And you're going to have to go through this transformation of denial, then acceptance. When an institution has been around for a long time prior to your existence, there's a much different method of being the captured. Now, I think the core definition of, this whole thing is that the human mind simply can't hang on to negativity. That's what Tony Robbins teaches, and I think it's completely true. You'll just, if you can't beat them, join them, is sort of the underlining theme of the Stockholm Syndrome. When an institution like NASA exists for a long, long time, and then you're born into it, and it's an institution that people accept as the authority on something, and then you start to question, well, there's some things that don't make any sense, especially with YouTube videos. We got transparent astronauts on harnesses with wires rotoscoped out, all kinds of wild evidence that the International Space Station footage is fake. There may be something up there, but we never see any other satellites in space. We never see the moon from the ISS. We never see any stars from the ISS. All kinds of weird issues. Trying to find a picture of Earth from space. So far, none exist. Just a bunch of composited fake shots, and they all admit it. So what do we do when we find out that an institution that, hey, in some capacities you could memorize everything that they've ever done, get into all their bleeding edge technology, and you might find yourself with a big fat income and revered amongst your peers, amongst the society at large as being an expert like Neil deGrasse Tyson does. And if you try to break out of that paradigm and you try to speak against it, or you start to question things that they've claimed, you'll find that there's this acidic blade that comes in from society trying to slice you to pieces. The mob rules mentality that Dio spoke of. And then you have to make a decision as to whether or not you're going to be a coward, a Stockholm Syndrome coward, or whether or not you're going to stand up for truth, regardless if anyone else believes it or not. Or at least, whether or not you know the truth or not, that what you've been told is not true. And that's a truth in itself, right? So this is where it gets complex. Where people will be loyal to institutions simply because they come with a legacy. They come with tradition. And I want to say, because we've never said this, I want to put this inside your mind. I want to give something a little bit more dimension than we usually give it, and that is the lie. A lie is a very sad moment in the fabric of time. Now, I'm not talking about a 5-year-old being told that there's a Santa Claus and that, presents are magically appearing underneath the tree. I think it's sad the universe doesn't have magic, quite frankly, at least that we know of, right? But it is very sad when an individual has to tell a lie for any reason whatsoever, especially when it doesn't benefit anyone. We have a religious faction in this world, and we have a scientific faction in this world, and then we have sort of the agnostic, which is sort of where I place myself, somewhere in between. I don't know what's true. I have some ideas. But the interesting thing is that telling a lie has a very interesting chemical and spiritual effect on an individual. As soon as you tell a lie, you feel it. You feel the regret immediately that you had to tell a lie. And yes, there are people who get really good at it. And I'm sure that their little ping of negativity is very small. Like a Hillary Clinton, I don't think she's ever spoken the truth in her life. And that's almost not an exaggeration. But I think it's a very interesting sort of rudimentary feeling based on how the universe is put together. Mankind throughout philosophy has tried to figure out, what would be the common law of the universe. And we all seem to come up with a couple basic common law things, which is you shouldn't kill someone else. Self-defense different. Punishment for some other equally egregious crime, that's different. But you shouldn't take a good person and kill them for any reason whatsoever. And you shouldn't steal someone else's stuff or mess with them. Sort of leave people alone, which includes everything. That's sort of the common law of the universe. Help others, if nothing else, right? And so the Stockholm Syndrome has two hemispheres, two sides to it, right? The captor and the captured. So there's obviously the physical version of that, being imprisoned, which rarely happens to any of us. And then you have, that's physical captured. And then you have people that are absolutely mentally captured. And a million of these people. People who are captured by a religion. by a Bible. People are captured by pop science. People are captured by political paradigms, right? I know you feel me. Our challenge, if it isn't obvious, is to make sure that we aren't captured by anyone. By anyone. And you might say, well, I've got children and I feel captured by them. You love your children. If you let your children capture you, then they would be able to use Jedi mind tricks on you and make you feed them cereal all day long, or pizza, or let them watch anything on television constantly, stay up all night. You don't let them capture you so that you can help them. You're like, I am your parent. I'm not your best friend. I'm your parent. And a parent is better than a best friend. And the difference between a parent and a best friend is that you only get one of me, and you will have several best friends. So let's live our life like that. I am here to help you and be your elder. There you go. There's the old stories where fathers get captured by their daughters, and their daughters extort money out of them, and fathers give them tons of money, and then they get in trouble with that money. If the father wouldn't be captured by the daughter, money wouldn't leave his hand, and she wouldn't get herself in so much trouble. But the reason why I'm doing this particular episode is to, one, raise your consciousness of the actual phrase, the Stockholm Syndrome, to give you the full intellectual power to use it in statements so that you can raise the consciousness among your friends. When you hear someone talk to you about some paradigm of thought that is completely fake, you can choose whether or not you either want to define this to them and not use the term, or use the term and define it to them, or any variation thereof, because it's a mechanism by which we become subservient, docile to those that self-declare themselves our captors, I should say, right? We all know that the people in power are merely in power because in our brains, we allow them to be in power. That's the craziest thing in the world, is that we actually believe, and I've been talking about this a lot in episodes, and I guess it's going to be sort of an underlining theme until we at least reach 100, which is that we need to stop believing that people are greater than us. And I think that we owe it to ourselves and to our children and to our friends to stop worshiping any form of monarchy, whether or not they are in power or not in power, whether or not they're just a celebratory king and queen of England. We need to absolutely stop allowing ourselves to buy plates with their faces on it. And we need to figure out a way to respect our police officers. I understand that they risk their lives every single day. And even though there are 2 holidays for soldiers who go off to war, there's not a single holiday for a police officer where we all just remember them every single day. But boy, we want them there after we call 911, right? And want them to be patient and kind, right? And that's the other funny thing. But their war is every single day. A police officer has no idea whether or not he's going to go to sleep at night when he wakes up. And the same goes for he or she's spouse, their children, their relatives, their friends. The war is every day. And we don't celebrate a single day in America for police officers. The only time you ever see us celebrate police officers in this country is when one of them dies and there's a funeral. But we want to make sure that, again, when they pull over someone, they never get upset. But they're completely marginalized by our population. So we have to figure out a way to show them respect, but still within our mind, realize that they are human beings just like us. They just have one of those jobs. And when we get pulled over, or whatever happens, it's just the most qualified guy on the block that knows how to protect you and has a lot of training to do so in most cases, right? But what happens when they show up, typically, because again, they're completely marginalized in the population, meaning they're not appreciated. And, some of these guys crack. And when they crack, they become a bad apple and they do horrible stuff. And then they feel like they all have to cabal together to protect the dipshit who killed someone in the jail cell illegally. Now, sometimes death happens, and it's just the luck of the draw. I know some scenarios personally where people were so high on drugs that when they were restrained, their hearts exploded. And the cops who were restraining him felt horrible, but it wasn't their fault. But when a police officer shows up, the class structure starts. They're a symbol of authority. They're a symbol of a higher order of human that has a gun. Pretty much can use it however they want to. Just got to follow out the right reform. It's almost like you get a couple freebies as a cop. Well, he killed that guy. It wasn't supposed to, but it's his first time. Just don't do it again. We have to figure out a way to balance the power structure in this world. That when we need to endow someone with special abilities, like a police officer, a soldier, or a politician, or a preacher, or somebody else. What's really weird for me is that the bankers run the world, and you can't really fathom the class structure of a banker besides the amount of money they have in the bank. When they can buy a bunch of stuff, when they get to show up in the Bentley, there's this class structure that's, I've been more fortunate than you because I'm more intelligent than you, got from a better bloodline than you, and then you cower down to them. If we could get Stockholm Syndrome in the minds of everyone, just massage up this frequency, make it common within our thought process, and then try to create mechanisms by which we avoid being captured in this mindset, then I think that we will organically balance out the structure of the world, potentially. It can't hurt, right? A lot of us, when you wake up, you feel trapped for the first couple of years. Once you realize, that there are factions out there that will murder you if you talk against them. They break the law, they pay someone off, and they kill you. There are plenty of doctors out there that have revealed the cabal of vaccinations hurting kids' brains, blamed on autism. And you wake up and you realize, oh my God, a bunch of doctors are being brutally murdered in their homes, their families being murdered as a demonstration to the rest of the doctors. And luckily, a lot of the doctors aren't, cowarding down. They're continuing to talk about it. Robert De Niro's talking about it. When you learn something special about Obama, someone out there kills you. It just happens. When you create a 0-point energy system and look for investing, the investors cabal to kill you. And they get little kickbacks from the oil companies to make sure that there is no competitor. I'm sure that there are people today who are alive today, and they're healthy today, that are going to be dead before September because they have the drop on Hillary Clinton. I am certain that there's a blacklist out there, and it's just going to be just a matter of time before she has them murdered, or her controllers have them murdered, the agents of the Bilderberg Group who have pre-selected her to be the President of the United States. And that might blow your mind, but don't let it. One of the most beautiful factors about understanding the Stockholm Syndrome is understanding that this is the mechanism that we have a title. We have a title for this mechanism of you feeling hopeless or feeling trapped by these powers that be. The snowball is getting a lot larger of enlightenment and awakening to the world's evil. I found a video the other day of a kid in a Latin kid in some sort of ghetto. He had some beautiful graffiti behind him. And the video was called Follow the Money, which we all know once you wake up, that's one of the biggest formulas that helps you find who's doing what, right? And this kid with tattoos on him and his sunglasses, he breaks it all down beautifully. How fiat money's created, how it's backed, all this stuff. And it was probably one of the most exciting videos I have seen in a long time, because we now have this trickle-down awakening going on. And now, seemingly a kid in the ghetto who would be preoccupied with a bunch of misdirection is completely awake. And he's making a video and putting it on YouTube. And it's going to find people just like him that would never listen to me. And he's also in his neighborhood waking people up that would never listen to me. And so this is an amazing moment in the history of our world, that this thing is spreading so deeply that all four corners of the earth are becoming sentient to the game. Now, I think it's pretty obvious that we have to do something as a result of waking up, but I think the snowball needs to roll a little bit further downhill. But I'm going to say that without knowing the percentages, I feel like we are so utterly close to a 50% mark of the world having completely awakened to at least the psychological mechanisms that fuels our personal Stockholm Syndrome. And that's awesome. So I want us all to start talking to our friends about being held captive by history, by tradition, by fear. It's funny because I have friends of mine who are just normal old citizens. They don't own guns. You would think they would be a pacifist. But when I talk to them about the world being upside down, if they ask me, they're not afraid. They're just like, okay, all right, I get it. I'll do some research on that, and we'll organize. And then I talk to people who are really physically strong people who have definitely in their lifetime had some good fisticuff moments and other moments, and they seem terrified. And I think the reason is that they've seen war, not necessarily real war, but they've had someone come at them where they were fearful of their life, and they have visions of someone coming at them from these controlling factions. And I think that's a very interesting thing. But now let's reverse Stockholm Syndrome for a second to talk about the psychological requirements of escaping it and why people tend to stay in it on purpose. Because you will probably have had a conversation with someone where you reveal that the conservative and liberal parties are the same, that they always do the same thing, that they never really fix anything, that no body of government anywhere in first world countries ever passes a law that makes your life better, right? The only reason why minimum wage was increased in the United States of America was to cause problems. To put the final nail in the coffin of humans being replaced by robots, right? But now let's slow down a scenario of being captured physically. Because this is what happens, I think, with the paradigms that we believe in, the spiritual Stockholm syndromes that we believe in. If you were captured by a group of people, then you would have a moment of utter fear and terror as you've lost complete control of your life, and every split second of your life during the capturing moment, you don't know if you're going to be raped, murdered, maimed, damaged, tortured. You just don't know, right? So once you get into a safe place, you're thankful. Even if you're in a jail cell and you only eat once a day. And believe it or not, that's exactly how we entered any of the false paradigms that we've believed in our lifetime, right? You're terrified of the universe. You don't know how the world works. And then all of a sudden you believe a paradigm such as left and right. And you're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. It was so easy to make the decision whether or not I was conservative or liberal. And now as long as I'm loyal to this choice of mine, I'm going to be fine. But now imagine you're in a jail cell, having been mistreated to get there, right? You were kidnapped somehow. It was a terrifying, disorienting moment of which, even though it might have been a split second, it seemed like it was forever. Now you're held captive. And now someone comes into the jail cell with you, and they're free. Somehow they've jangled the door, they're looking through the bars, and they say, come on, let's go. I'm going to get you out of here. And then all of a sudden, Stockholm Syndrome kicks in. Two things occur. One, Stockholm Syndrome allows you to bullshit yourself that your captor is actually a good person. And if they're some of these weirdos that capture kids and capture women, they'll make the women feel like that there is some love there, even though they won't let them be free. And there could be love between a captor and a capturer. So the first layer of defense is love. Well, this person loves me. My definition of love is completely screwed up because I'm no longer in the real world going through the natural formation of love and relationships, right? I'm forced with this person. But the second tier of the whole thing is the terror of going back through the membrane that brought them in, which is all the terror that they had to experience to get here. They fear that there is more terror and more horrific uncertainty, potentially life-ending uncertainty to exit where they are currently being held. So that's why they resist. There's false sense of camaraderie. There's a false sense of being correct. And then there's the utter horror of what's on the other side. So take someone who is following a political party. You have a person in front of you who has worshipped a political party for maybe 50 years. And then you come in and you say, look, this isn't real. The voting fraud's already in. Your candidate's only winning because they're throwing votes in voting machines, and they've caught them red-handed. And we've caught the people that try to dismiss this red-handed auditing. And they'll go through some denial to try and say that didn't happen. Because, again, they defend their captor. And so you continue to lament and tell them, hey, this is not what you think it is. Look at this right here. This is scientific proof. It's at least not what you think it is. It may not be what I think it is, but it's not what you think it is, right? And you try to get them to escape. And maybe you get them over the barrel of their own internal fears, and they sit there about, their own internal denial about the paradigm that they're in. But then they go, where am I going now? And you're going to go, well, you're going to exit the Matrix. Now, to take the movie Matrix literally, it's actually very interesting, right? Neo was completely physically fine inside the Matrix. He had an apartment, he had a job, he had a life. But what was the rehabilitation he had to go through when he woke up? The beautiful metaphor of that film is that he woke up with giant wires, big giant cables stuck in his body, all down his back, in the back of his neck. He'd never really eaten real food because he was on some weird sort of IV gel. And so when he popped out, it was harder. It was harder. And he didn't have the gigantic multi-million or multi-billion population of the earth to interact with. He simply was one guy with maybe 6 other people. And it was disorienting. And you can imagine, just like, I think it was, I forget this guy's name, the guy who played Guido in Tom Cruise's movie way back in the day. He wanted to go back in the Matrix, right? He was so sick and tired of running around with Morpheus. He just wanted back in. Right? And that's what these people are going to want sometimes. They're going to look at the alternative of truth and simply say, that's a shitty world. I don't want to live in that world. Where the people that run the world don't have my best interest in mind. I don't want to wake up and believe such a thing. And so I'm going to construct a fantasy and live within it. And hey, the only bummer with that analogy, if you want to say, look, would it be nice just to leave people alone and then we could just all be in a little fantasy of our own? And the problem with that is that the world isn't fun anymore the way that they're running it, right? The boom and bust cycles of economic collapse have robbed every living being of at least more destiny. The crappy educations are so utterly horrible that we can't have children that invent anything new that's of any interest, right? But if we don't start resisting then we're going to have problems. If we don't start, figuring out a way to get people to exit their captors, we're going to have issues. And that's why I think we need to heighten our awareness of the discussion. When Obama came in office, you had probably one of the most brainwashed group of people on planet Earth. And the people that were more susceptible to the brainwashing were definitely your Stockholm Syndrome people. 9/11 was extremely, extremely hard to digest. And, of course, a Republican, another fake paradigm, a Republican president was holding down office for the first 8 years of that experience. And people associate the president of the United States with the phase of the world that they live in. So for 8 years, we had war. Everybody was sick and tired of seeing George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld. So by the time they had a handsome guy come around like Barack Obama, he was a good teleprompt speaker. Couldn't really speak for himself, of course. He seemed relaxed and chill. Shepard Fairey commits a felony and creates the Hope poster for him. That poster got him a felony, people, for copyright infringement because he never paid the photographer who took the shot of him. Why Obama didn't pardon him? Because that poster made that unqualified person president. It really did. Hope, right? You had hope juice. Hope was a fake emotion, right? But I will say this. In my life, I have never experienced a larger group of people associated with the president than I have or Barack Obama, who said the following: I supported Barack Obama, and I am embarrassed that I did so. I don't think I've ever heard that. I don't think I ever heard that about Bush. Definitely not Clinton. Not even George Bush Sr. People made decisions, they stuck by them, and they didn't have, at the end of the term, any reason why they were embarrassed to have made the choice. But Barack Obama has turned people like crazy. He is a Trump supporter machine. And Bernie is sort of the rebirth of that hope poster. People are making super duper quick and I think loosely informed decisions about who to be loyal to when it comes to running at least America. Bernie Sanders was giving a speech somewhere and a bird landed on his podium. And all of a sudden the whole crowd got joyous, little sparrow. And then they made little posters. And a lot of my Hollywood friends were like, oh my God, I really want this man to become president, because they had this little sweet moment where a cute little bird landed on the podium as if God himself said, I shall make the bird land on the choice of my own, Baseless, emotional alliances. The same exact ignorant brains that put Obama in office are the people that fall for a bird that lands on a podium randomly. Experience doesn't appear to matter. I think as Ice Cube said, the rapper, he said, they asked him about Bernie and versus Trump. And he said, Trump just seems like he's done what he's talking about. He's talking about doing it for us. He's done it for himself. He seems like he's got experience. Here's Cubes, and he's a businessman. He's one of the most successful rappers out of NWA. Definitely one of the most intelligent, deep-minded rappers back in his day. Today he does goofy movies. But they asked him about Bernie, and he just summed it up in 2 seconds. Very nicely, he just said, that dude's been in office for 30 years and nothing's changed. He's part of the system. You put him in office, nothing's going to change because he's part of the system. All right. Ice Cube is not suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. And I think that we should be able to usurp heroes that that don't find themselves captive in the Stockholm Syndrome. The greatest minds that we worship don't suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. Even the royalty of the world don't suffer from Stockholm Syndrome. The bankers of the world, those that are most wealthy, those that can wake up in the morning and determine what they want to do all day long, they're not suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. But they would call people like you and I peasants. And peasants absolutely live in Stockholm Syndrome. It is the mortar between the bricks, if not the bricks, that build the reality that we accept. And we have to escape. And we have to build mechanisms to make sure that we're not recaptured. So how do we measure it? In a closing statement, how do we measure it, and how do we make sure that we don't fall into it? I think it comes down to one word that we can use to audit our potential cowardice to other people and other concepts. And it doesn't mean you can't use this word in your life, and you should. But I think the word is loyalty. Loyalty is going to be the metric by which we discover whether or not we are our own person or whether or not we are someone else's person. Loyalty can be one of the most beautiful things on planet Earth and the thing that defines you in a beautiful way. But misplaced, it can be the fuel in the propulsion system of complete lie and deceit. By giving loyalty to an unconvicted murderous felon like Hillary Clinton, you're perpetuating that negative, evil spirit in our world, giving her power to continue committing crimes. I can't even imagine this woman being the president of the United States. There's a lot of stories about people that tried to walk up to Dick Cheney, who were fans of Dick Cheney, and they simply didn't kiss his ass enough, and he sent the Secret Service after them to harass them for days. And he turned fans into absolute enemies who hated him. Hillary's solution for nearly everything is the death of someone. And she would walk into a mall, okay? And if they said, hey, we want you to drive your car into the mall because we think that'd be a really cool presence attack on everyone inside. We're going to rope it all off so everybody's safe. And she goes in, doesn't know how to drive the car, and kills 10 people. Her epitaph would be, well, what difference does it make? It's the problem of the families now. I just wanted to drive a car into the mall to be fancy, right? If we give our loyalty to the wrong people, I want you to think of giving your loyalty away as usurping the moral fiber of those you give loyalty to. If you give loyalty to evil, you will become evil. Remember the lesson in law of attraction. Evil has a frequency. In our world, forget religion, forget science, evil would be the undoing of goodness, the undoing of life, the undoing of happiness. And if you put loyalty towards evil, you will simply be consumed by it, whether or not you believe it to be euphoric. And there's definitely relative evils and relative goods. But where you have loyalty to something is something I think you want to put your mind to a little bit more. There's headless corporations out there that make devices that we like, right? There's Apple Computer and Google. And we tend to put loyalty towards these organizations as they produce products that help us live our lives, right? Okay. Maybe that's more benign and less threatening. But when it comes time to put a loyalty down to a political party, which is a false need in the first place, right? They'll tell you, well, you have to pick one to vote. You can't walk into a voting booth in America and not be a declared Republican or a declared independent or Republican. A lot of us are just constitutionalists. If you're in Europe, you're just a Magna Carta person. You're like, hey, I've got rights because I'm alive. And it doesn't matter what anyone's whispered in your ear, you have no more rights than I have. The only exception we have to that rule is someone who's committed an egregious crime that we would call in America a felony. Once you do that, you lose your rights a little bit because you have shown you don't have the responsibility to just be alive and commingle with other human beings. So in closing, let's think about our loyalties. And I would wager that as each one of you sit for a split second in a chair and you think about your loyalties, you have sort of an obtuse feeling, an overwhelming frequency of goodness within you, and you're like, look, I know I'm a good person. I know I am. I'm not perfect, but I'm good. And overall, I don't know exactly how to align myself to make sure that my good insides align with what's going on in the world. But overall, if that's your goal and that's your opinion of yourself, you probably are a great benefit to the rest of us. And I personally believe that 99.9% of the world, whether they be informed or not, ignorant or stupid, they are good people. We are good people. We're just misled constantly. And these paradigm loyalties, which turn into various levels of Stockholm Syndrome, are the dividing mechanism by which they, very specifically, the ruling class, the banking families, and all their minions, the way they keep us away from each other. Divided. Now I'm going to give you an extra credit perception of these paradigms. I've worked in video games for the majority of my life, and there's something we learn in game design very quickly, and that is that the most successful games in the world have no endings. You can play them perpetually forever. Whether they be massive multiplayer online games or simply games like Tetris, which you could just keep playing and playing and playing, right? As we determine what we will be loyal to, it is important that what we are loyal to has some level of finality, or at least a stage by which we can rest our minds and rest our souls. If you were for world peace, that's not a paradigm. Really, it's a method of existing. It's a state. It's a single state of existence. But if you're a Democrat or Republican, then it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing war with an ongoing enemy. Two sides. Like I said, we are taught as children that having a two-party system is the way we win. I'm not so sure that's it. Why would there be a two-party system if there's only one race on planet Earth, and that's the human race? How can we ever come together if every single modern country on planet Earth has a divide right down the middle? When we discover tribes, whether it be in the South American rainforests or the jungles of Africa, we don't find a two-party system there. We find a single party, and that's how they survive. The only disputes are usually in the transference of power from the current chief to the successor, right? As long as the chief does a good job and mentors his children, typically it's the firstborn male is the inheriting body of the whole thing. So I think you feel me. Hopefully this is helpful. Let's use the term Stockholm Syndrome. Let's make sure that our loyalties really benefit humanity and ourselves long term. If you're a parent, it's imperative that you become loyal to something that has an end goal, a state of peace and prosperity, right? And that, when I say peace, the duality to that would be war, right? Well, it's not a built-in eventuality that war exists, but it's a built-in eventuality that there's a left and a right if we keep this two-party system alive in all of our first world countries. It's time to bail out on that crap, right? But hopefully this provided a little bit of metaphysics so that you can have the conversation a little deeper and ease someone out of their fear. They have their hand in the cookie jar and they're grabbing onto the cookie tightly. And that's the false paradigm that they're worshiping. We need to convince them that they let go of the cookie and drop it in the jar. That the table behind them that's got a mountain of cookies is the immediate reality that they get once they pull out. If you haven't already, go to mkultraradio.com. From there, you can get everything Deep Thoughts. This is one program on MK Ultra Radio. This is Deep Thoughts Radio. If you want to go to the Facebook page, go to facebook.com/deepthoughtsradio. If you don't remember that, just go to mkultraradio.com and click DT Facebook at the top. If you're coming through YouTube, but you'd rather have it in a podcast for your car, you can get it straight from our website, mkultraradio.com. Definitely looking for new ideas, new episodes. I'm not exactly sure what to do after 100, besides go back and re-record some of these. I'm contemplating a slightly different format to a show. I'm not sure I'm going to make these any shorter. One of the most beautiful things is we keep out all the riffraff. Typically, anytime I get a negative comment on the YouTube channel, it's typically apparent that the person commenting hasn't watched the episode. So they get about 10, 15 minutes in, and whatever reason, it's rubbing them wrong, and they have a comment. But honestly, I think we've had like 4 comments out of... I did the math on it. I think we now have... totaling up all the minutes that people have watched on this channel, on this particular show, we're up to something like 460 days of solid viewing. That's pretty cool. It means people are getting this thing. But I appreciate all of your comments, all of your viewership. If you dig the series, please subscribe. If you like this particular video, please give me a thumbs up. It just helps people find it organically in their referral suggestions within YouTube. But again, thanks for coming. As always, take care of yourself and somebody else. And I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.